So I walk into the red room. This is the greatest story of my life. Walk in the red room, and I'm waiting for President Obama to come in. And of course, after sweating, he comes walking in there. I'm like freaking out. He claps his hands like, Carlos, how are the girls? Right? Like he's so prepped right outside the door. Probably somebody tells him that I have
You're
to.
Right.
You know, but he comes in acting like he's, and I feel the second I see him, I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's my best friend. Right? We're like, you know, kind of bro it out, you know? And so I tell him, I go, my dad, he's a first generation. He was asking me about my family. I was like, my dad, he's so proud. He's an immigrant to this country. I was like, he's so proud of me. He goes, let's call him. And freaking President Obama lets me take my phone out, call my dad in the moment. And he goes, Dr. Whitaker. And literally my dad to this day, he doesn't have a lot of memories. He remembers that one. He got to talk to the president of the United States. And so here's where a lot of my story shifts. Ready? One of the greatest days of my life. Here I am I'm singing. I lead a devotional in the White House. I sing Nothing But the Blood of Jesus, in the White House. President Obama,
a former CCM evangelical worship leader.
Yes. Right. And so President Obama is singing with me. Like he's singing right in front of me. So I go on to Instagram. I may have been Instagram, and I post pictures. Right. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, look, it's me and literally the president's like right here. I'll send you a photo of it. Maybe you can stick it in your video. And we're like arm in arm, you know, smiling. I'm singing the song. I'm leading a devotional. And I put that on my Instagram. This is the first time that it clicked for me. I got trashed. I mean, I got destroyed by my followers, like on Facebook, and like, how could you eat with that Muslim, blah, blah, blah. And I was shook because I'd never even dabbled in politics. I'd never even talked about that stuff on any of my socials. And again, this was 2015. I got destroyed. And that was, I think, the first time that I felt this, wait a second, where am I? Where do I lean? Like, what is happening here? When I was on staff at North Point, I was very open that I was voting for Obama, and I did like a lot. I was getting a lot of crap from people. And I just remember for the first time being like, I don't think I line up with a lot of people that I'm around all the time. And that was kind of the beginning for me. And then after I posted that thing about leading worship, I was freaking leading worship, singing your hymns in the White House, and I got destroyed. And so that was the beginning for me of going like, okay, there's other stuff I got to unpack. So anyway.
What's up, my friends? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. This is a special one. I brought on my friend Carlos Whitaker. He is an author, a speaker, an exvangelical. Is that even a word? An exvangelical person. And we went through his story on this episode. He has a crazy story. We talked a lot about his journey, kind of leaving white evangelicalism, what 2020 did to him, his new book, How to Human, and everything in between. So this is a very engaging and fun conversation that also has some, at least for me, some really surprising moments. And I really appreciated Carlos's vulnerability coming on and just explaining where he's at and what he's working through. And I think, honestly, that's the beginning for anyone of healing and finding better paths forward. So Carlos, thank you so much for coming on. Friends, make sure you check him out on podcast or on Twitter, Instagram, check out his book, etc. It's really worth listening to it. He does really great content. That being said, as always, thank you for being here. If you like our content, that's the new Evangelicals. You can share this podcast. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can, tell a friend that we're on Instagram. I don't know what you want to do, but either way, however you share our work helps people know that they are not alone as they navigate their faith journey. And I also want to say that we are a nonprofit organization holding space for thousands of people. If you want to help support the work that we do, you can donate via the link in our show notes. All donations are tax deductible. That is how we were able to give you all this content completely paywall free. All right, friends, without further ado, here's my interview with Carlos. Talk to you later.
Sir.
Wow. All right. Carlos Whitaker. I've been on your podcast. Now You're on my podcast because I'm a good Christian.
You are such a good. Am I on the new evangelical Christian podcast circuit? Is that what's happening right now?
Yeah.
Is this 100%. The beginning of it? This is the beginning.
This is the beginning. This is the beginning.
It's so
Welcome
good,
to
dude.
the podcast, Carlos.
Thanks, man. Thanks so much for having me. I honestly am. I'm pumped. I'm honored. I just can't wait to get in the weeds with you. So,
well, you and I have been we've been chatting here and there. We've gotten dinner together. I've been on your podcast. We've texted about some stuff. So I feel like this is a friend conversation.
Yeah.
But you are a man of mystery to me, and I have a lot of questions for you.
Okay,
all right.
I
So
love it.
the first thing I want to ask you is, what gives you the right? No, I'm just kidding. That's from The Office. That's the Michael Scott quote.
Well, and also FYI, I've only watched 2 episodes of The Office in my entire life, so I wouldn't even know. I know we're already starting there. Your listeners have already logged off and canceled me. Like
I'm logging off, bro. I'm done. I've never stopped a guest, but there's a first for everything.
Yeah, there is a first. And to be fair, because this was such a controversial topic on my Instagram, everyone was like, "Are you kidding me?" I actually said, "Okay, listen, tell me the episode I need to watch, and I'm going to watch it live on Instagram." And so I watched 3 episodes live on Instagram with my entire Insta Familia, and was enjoying it. And I was like, "Okay, maybe I can get into this." So.
What episodes did you watch? Now I have to know.
I know. It literally, I just went the first 3. They were trying to give me a whole bunch of, and then the whole conversation was, no, you got to get past season 1. And I'm like, when there's all these rules about shows, I'm like, no, I don't want rules. I want to either like it or not like it.
Listen, I feel you. Okay. For the record, season 1 is great. You have Hot Girl, you have basketball, healthcare. Those are 3 top tier episodes right away.
Yeah.
Listen, I will actually, you know what? I just feel led. Jesus, I just come before you right now to pray for Carlos and to pray for a spirit of renewal in his mind to start watching more Office. And now my audience is triggered. Now they're all driving off the road. So
for the 5 people that are left, let's jump in. Let's jump in.
So Carlos, I mean, you and I have chatted here and there, but I am kind of curious, like some of your background. I mean, I don't really know. Did you grow up evangelical? Is that how you grew up, like Christian? What's the background there? Let's just start with the basics.
Okay, so let me go basic. When you say the word evangelical, what does that mean?
Like either Hillsong or John MacArthur, something in like that vein of like the ethos of Christianity.
Yeah. So, okay, so let me give you mine. So I grew up, this is actually going to be crazy. My father was a pastor at Primera Iglesia Bautista de Pico Rivera, first bilingual Baptist church in Pico Rivera, East LA. So my dad was the pastor of a bilingual church where he would preach in English and in Spanish. So he'd preach in Spanish and then translate it to English because all of the older generation in his church, they didn't speak English. But then all the younger generation in his church, the kids, they didn't speak Spanish. So he literally was like, Dios es el mismo en inglés y español. God is the same in English and Spanish. So I grew up a preacher's kid from the moment I was born in East LA in Pico Rivera. I was born into a Baptist church. Like I was Baptist, not only Baptist, but a Southern Baptist church in Southern California. Reason being, my father is a first generation immigrant to this country. He was raised in Panama, in Colón, Panama. Like I've taken him there to go visit, like in the slums of Panama. And my dad is like the prototypical Southern Baptist evangelical success story. He is like the kid that they did vacation Bible school in the church's backyard, and all the white missionaries came from the States to do it. And then my dad got invited to church, got taken on a little bus and went and loved the puppets, and then started going to church and ended up at Bethany Baptist Church in Colón, Panama, where he kind of was raised through youth group, all these things. And then my dad ended up immigrating to the United States. And so it's really my dad's kind of faith journey that landed him as the pastor of this tiny little bilingual church in East LA, which is what I was born into. So yes, very evangelical, very Southern Baptist faith and message. My dad worked for the Southern Baptist Convention after he was a pastor there, he worked for the Home Mission Board, which became the North American Mission Board, and did like missions here in America kind of deal. And so, yeah, man, that now, I mean, that's kind of like the lens in which I viewed the world for a long, long time.
So were you someone like me who kind of always owned their faith, was kind of like one of the good kids, always wanted to be a Christian? Like, did you kind of inherit your parents' faith and make it your own? Did you not? Like, what was that journey like for you, like, through like your teen years to young adult?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, teen years. Okay. So we moved when my dad got the job at the Home Mission Board, we moved to Atlanta. And, it was a little complicated for me because we moved when I was, in elementary school. And here I was, this young Black Afro-Latino, which the term Afro-Latino wasn't even a term back then. And we move into the South. And my dad is like, well, I mean, he's Baptist. He's Southern Baptist. So we've got to find a Southern Baptist church. And so we did. We found ourselves a Southern Baptist church in Atlanta. And I mean, my dad will, he can't recall these things now, but stories he would tell me about, like our first Sunday there, he's like, literally, he was told by a deacon, we're not allowed to go to that church because they were like blatantly racist. Like, so like we were, so, and I butted up against that my entire life. So I kind of found myself in this position of trying to appease the white Southern, when I say Southern Baptist, not just Southern Baptist, but like Southern Christians, and really becoming as white as I could be, because in order to be successful in what I felt like was the South, I had to be like a good white Southern boy. And if I could do that, then I would have a lot more success, which was true. And I saw my friends kind of through high school getting what they wanted because they were, so I was trying to portray as much as that as I could. The problem is I'm not white and I had an afro. And so there was this resentment inside of me. Not only towards, I think, my friends and the culture I was in the church, but also even my parents, like, why did you pick this for me? Like why is this version of growing up into my high school years the thing that I'm having to battle? Like I was literally an all white high school. Like I wasn't ever able to be fully me. And so I think that that's where that rebellion kind of came in. And so I tried to be like the perfect Southern kind of Christian boy. But I was butting up against that, like in the reality of my life, whether that be, drinking and partying and kind of doing all the things. But I think I had my parents' faith. It was 100%. I was just kind of cookie cutter, my mom and dad's faith all the way up until, I mean, dude. And then I ended up going on staff at a Southern Baptist church in Southern California. So like all the way up until, and then I worked in North Point. So I was in it, bro. Like I was in it all the way up until into my adulthood, into raising my kids. And then, probably 2016, 2015 started to maybe ask some bigger questions that I'd never asked before.
Okay, so let's pause right there for a second because I want to go back to what you said. This is very important, I think, for my audience, who I believe is predominantly white and trying to kind of, understand the world in a different way. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. So tell me if I'm reading what you said wrong. What I'm hearing you say is that when you first discovered like the American South and like the Southern Baptist people over there, you encountered two different things. One was just blatant racism, like, hey, your skin 100%. Color doesn't jive here. But also, it sounds like you also encountered a colorblindness that also made you assimilate into whiteness. Is that fair to say?
That is very fair to say. And that color blindness was something that I never fought against, something that I actually probably perpetuated in a lot of my friendships. I mean, I remember specifically around my groups of friends, like they would tell black jokes in front of me. And I just remember kind of like shying down and shrinking down, never kind of saying anything because I'm like, these are my only friends. Like I can't lose this group. And so, there was a whole lot of that. And, hindsight always being what it is, looking back and now, it's now seeing the adult version of these teenage boys that I was friends with and seeing kind of what tweets they're liking these days. I'm like, okay, I see now, and so it all makes sense.
Well, that's important. I wanted to draw that out because I think I'm realizing more and more how even the terminology of color blindness actually isn't as colorblind as we're led to believe. And its history actually is based in trying to maintain the status quo. And so a lot of people I'm meeting, like my friend to me, Spencer Helms, who wrote the book Unleavened, her story is about going from the black church, assimilating into colorblind white Jesus, but then realizing that she still had to lose part of herself to assimilate into even the colorblind theology. It still had a predominant view. So I wanted to tease it out of you because when you said that, my antennas went up like, oh, wait a second. I have new language for this now.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so that's very helpful to understand for sure.
Absolutely. It was. Yeah.
So you go from that to being on staff at several churches. I mean, listen, North Point is no small church. That's Andy Stanley.
Yep.
So obviously, to a degree, at some point, you had to decide, I like this work enough to want to go into full-time ministry. What was that part of your journey like?
Yeah, so I was in college at California Baptist University in Riverside, California, and when I first went there, my roommate was like, "Hey, there's a church called Sandals Church that we meet in a basement, and it's like really." And I remember thinking, like, I mean, listen, I'm coming from like Southern Baptist Atlanta church, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, like Sandals?
Yeah.
Like, what is this? Is this a
Sandals
cult?
Resort? What?
Yeah, like what is happening? And I joined, and it was it was a small like gathering, like it was meeting in a church basement at the time in Riverside, California. And I just remember going, and there was like this guy named Moy, he became one of my best friends, and he was like leading worship. Even the term leading worship, like they were like, this is a worship leader. I was like, what's a worship leader? Like what is this? And we're singing like in the secret, in the quiet place, right? And there's like bongos on stage, and I'm just like, this is I'm getting like goosebumps, during worship, during singing. And I was like, whatever this is was nothing like anything. I literally 2 years prior was in a handbell choir called the Tintinnabulators. Okay. So like I am moving from being in the Tintinnabulators to playing bongos in the basement of a church. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I was a hook, line, and sinker. I'm in. And so my journey became just kind of attending this church called Sandals. And then maybe it was like 7 months in, I'm still in college. Moy, the bongo and the secret guy was like, hey man, like I heard you play guitar. And I was like, yeah. He's like, dude, you should play on the worship team. And I was like, what? No way. And so again, at Sandals, I joined the worship team. And okay. I mean, I may be getting too in the weeds here. Stop.
Do it. Tell the story.
Okay. So this was era Jars of Clay era, like first Jars of Clay record, right? And I remember, like I was playing Worlds Apart. I am the only one to blame for this, right? And I'm like playing that, like that E progression on the guitar, right? Just kind of going up and down. And Moy was like, dude, you should play that. You should play that for church, like at the end. And I was like, wait, they'll let me just play a regular song? He's like, yeah. So I played that Sunday, and I just remember, like in the middle of the song, kind of stopping in the middle of the song and saying something to the crowd. Like, I don't know, like, okay, so this next part of the song is whatever. And that may have been the first time that any worship leader ever said anything during the songs, like taught or talked. And after that, the pastor, Matt, came up to me and he's like, dude, like that was amazing. And next thing you know, like I am the worship leader. Like it was one Sunday, one Jars of Clay song to now I'm printing out like song sheets and I'm putting it in the binders and I'm hosting tryouts and I'm like full-fledged worship leader. So that began my journey of being like an on-staff worship leader in a church. I was there for 10 years at Sandals Church in Riverside, California as the worship pastor. And I was there for a decade from that moment in college for 10 years later. And so again, so that was I into it. Like this was like first Passion record, first Hillsong United record days where I'm just like, what? This is amazing, right? We're covering every United tune every week. I'm just trying to be Charlie Hall and Chris Tomlin, doing the best I
Charlie
can.
Hall, man, that's a deep cut for me.
Come on.
Whoa, man. Sorry, I just got triggered some flashbacks. Charlie Hall.
Hey, listen, that's a guy you want on this podcast because you want to hear his journey. I'm telling you.
I will write him down.
Yeah, write
What's
that
his
down.
song? It may be dark, but God is light or something like that.
Into marvelous light. Yeah. Come on, dude.
I'm writing that one down. Okay.
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Sorry,
so
that's
I'm all in.
A blast in the past. Yeah, you're all in.
Yeah. So I'm all in. I'm on staff. And I think, I'm there for a decade, man. I mean, that's a long time to be on staff.
That's a long time, bro.
Marry my wife there, have our babies there, adopt our son while we're there. And then I stumbled upon a friendship with a guy that was on staff in Atlanta at North Point, which at the time North Point was like, they're putting Andy Stanley on video screens from the floor to the ceiling. He's like hologram on. And I just remember as a like service, my job was service programming director. I can't remember what it was at the time. Churches make up fancy names for jobs now. And so I somehow through a journey ended up at North Point, like leaving Sandals, ending up at North Point. I was at their Buckhead campus. So there was 3 campuses at the time. I was at their kind of in the city campus as the service programming director over everything on Sundays, meeting with Andy 2 or 3 times a week. I was helping him write it, with creative for his sermons. I was over all the music and production and video. And dude, that was like honestly, like for like tech worship, music people, I was the top, bro. Like it was it. That's where I was. And that's probably where I started to have some wrestle. That's probably where I was not welcomed. The Andy and Jeff and my bosses, and even most of the people around me welcomed me, but I was an outsider. Like I was like this tattooed, bald dude coming in from Southern California to the North Point culture. And at the time, literally maybe it was the month I got there, they just made a rule that you could wear jeans on Sundays instead of slacks. So like khakis at North Point.
Wow.
So like that's when I was there. So, I definitely was ruffling some feathers there. And so I didn't last very long, maybe 2 years. And then I bounced. So,
well, it's interesting. So yes, as a professional drummer playing at a place like North Point or Elevation, those are like seen as the pinnacle of just tech and excellence in worship music culture, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of what you think about Elevation's theology or about their lead pastor, like they pump out records and oftentimes they're really well done, they're really well arranged, they're really catchy, they're well produced, right? Any serious musician respects the work that they do on just a purely technical level. And North Point is no exception. So it's interesting to me that you tell me you've reached like the peak, right, of what is the dream. I know life is complicated, but I'm listening to you say, I'm getting paid to be a worship dude at one of the largest churches in America. I wake up thinking about music and worship. And yet I was still, that's when I started wrestling. That's when I started asking big questions. Help me understand what's going on.
So here was the rub. I always had this heart for people that weren't in the church. And when I say that, I don't want it to sound like I was like this evangelism dude. I didn't have a heart. And I still don't. I didn't have a heart for like going and saving people or leading people to Jesus. Actually, I did that. That wasn't a care that I had. I don't know if that's, whatever. So that wasn't my heart, but I did have a heart for people that were never going to come.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. Most churches, there was this model, at least at North Point, it was, at the time, it may be different now, but it was like, there's different, they had the foyer, the living room, and the kitchen is kind of how, I think it was North Point. Maybe it was another church, but that's how they described their different environments, right? So Sunday morning worship is the foyer, because that's where people first enter into your home. And then the living room is like small groups, right? It's like, and so there was a foyer, the living room, the kitchen. And I just remember pushing back against that, going like, well, what about the people that are never going to come into the foyer? What about the people on the sidewalk? And so that was my initial wrestle, was with this idea that somehow Sundays were the goal. And my wrestle was like, I don't feel, and again, I failed out of Bible college. Like I'm theology and me aren't like, we don't party. Right. So like I have theology, but like, I'm not like smart with it.
Right.
And I just remember thinking like, I don't know, like this can't be the goal, right? Like this thing that we're producing with all these lights and the music. And I believe God creates music. I believe it gives us the ability to feel emotion. And so, you know, I don't really ever get into that side of things. Like I'm fine with music that makes us feel, but I just kept thinking this can't be it. Right. So one of I think the beginning of the end for me, in my time there was, I did this thing called the Buckhead Music Project while I was on staff, and it was pretty cool. Like Jeff and Andy both gave me, like, Jeff Henderson was my boss at Buckhead Church, and they both gave me a long leash, man. They were like, listen, we hired you to kind of shake things up. So I started this thing called the Buckhead Music Project, where I was like, hey, we have the foyer, the living room, the kitchen here, but like, what about people that are never coming? Let's go to clubs. So I kind of created my own, like, my programming team at church. I mean, I'm remembering their faces now, how confused they look. I was like, we're going to be like a promoter in Atlanta. And I want us to start having shows in clubs. And so like, we have a lot of great artists that lead worship. Most of the worship leaders were like actual artists that were actually doing, you know, they weren't working at the church. So they were actually doing music, and the worship leading was an extra way to pay bills. Whole other conversation. But right. I asked them, hey, let's go to Eddie's Attic in Decatur. We had a show there. We had a show all over Atlanta. We started having shows all over Atlanta. And I was like, the only rule is you can't you can't bring somebody to this thing that would ever come to church with you. Like I don't want, like, if you have a friend that's like, no, I'll come to church with you next week, they can't come. This is just for them. And so we were playing cover songs. We were doing all these things. And anyway, whatever. So that was kind of my way of starting to like push against whatever the Sunday is the secret. Yeah. And I thought, no, Sunday's not. I want to go out to the people. Like, I want to go out and see what are their needs? Like what do they need? Like how can we pour into that? And so anyway, there was a little bit of conflict. Again, this was a long time ago within the leadership. Like, man, I don't know, like, people are buying drinks and people are drinking beer. And right. Carlos is like, we're promoting this as North Point. And so that was when I just was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to fit really well inside a structure like this. And, you know, come to find out, it was probably better that I didn't, you know, because I feel like what I'm doing now is, you know,
well, I mean, you did go from, hey guys, we could have jeans on the platform now, to, hey, who wants to buy a drink? I mean, pretty quickly, right? For an organization that's it was like really fast.
One of the pastors there once pulled me into his office about a year into me working there. I worked there for 2 years, and he said, I'll never forget. He looks at me. He's like, Carlos, you're kind of like nitroglycerin to this organization. And I was like, I remember thinking like, what? He goes, you can make us go really fast, or you can blow us up. And I just remember being like, okay, maybe this isn't going to work.
No, right. I mean, at that point, writing's on the wall, right? Okay. Yeah. So what? Okay. So that happens. You eventually leave there. You go to another church. Is that what you do?
Well, no, I sign a record deal with Integrity Music, and I moved to Nashville, and I become the next greatest failure of a CCM artist. So I am like leading, I'm leading worship at North Point, and then Integrity Music's like, dude, you're a great worship leader. So next thing you know, I moved to Nashville, and I sign a record with Integrity. I make a record. I'm touring with, this is the year after I leave North Point. I'm now on tour with the Newsboys, literally the Newsboys. Who were these bands? Disciple, Cutlass. Oh, yeah. And then I was like the opening band. It was me, and some tracks in big arenas, and nobody would pay attention to me, and I'm up there, and so now I'm seeing like the behind the scenes of the Christian music industry, right? So not only did I just leave kind of the guts of the mega evangelical church, and now I'm like getting the behind the scenes and the guts of like CCMville, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is just a disaster. And also, to be fair, my life at this moment, like my decisions I was making, I was like self-sabotaging my life. Like I was in the darkest season of my life. And so like making poor choices, really, really ruining a lot of relationships around me. And yeah, I moved to Nashville to do that, to put out, to become a CCM artist. And I was on tour with John Mark McMillan, Jeremy Camp, and me. That was one tour. Another tour I went out with the Shanes. That was my first tour. And then I did the Newsboys tour. And then I was like, I'm done. Like I can't do this anymore. And so that's why I moved to Nashville, but never was on staff at a church again.
Wait, why were you done though? Like, what was the moment where you're like, was it just too much bullshit behind the scenes? Like, what was going on?
No, I mean, I was the majority of the bullshit behind the scenes. But for me, it was, I actually, Tim, like I didn't enjoy making the music. I actually, more and more people were telling me, Carlos, you're a lot better at talking between the songs than you are singing the actual songs. A lot of people were like, I also had a blog at the time, for anyone that's old enough to remember what a blog is. And it was called Ragamuffin Soul, like very cool Christian name. But
so cool.
It was, I mean, I had like 20,000 readers a day that were on this blog. And so I was writing my feelings every day. And I just was always pushing the envelope in kind of the evangelical circles. Like I remember this was like 2010, and like I made a video of me taking Paxil because I was on an antidepressant. And so I was like, hey, listen, I like took my Paxil and just on camera so that people could see, hey, here I'm like a pastor at a church, and I'm on, dude, I got in so much trouble for doing that because again, You're not supposed to show that you do. And so like, I just was always kind of disturbing and disrupting that circle to where, it was always just this rub. It was always a rub that I could never, I just was never totally comfortable in it. So
in my own way, I understand much of what you're talking about, especially being the rub. So, okay, this is a fascinating story to unpack. So let's keep going because I have more questions along the way. So the CCM thing blows up. It's a disaster. People are telling you, hey man, you're fine at singing, but you're great at talking. You eventually say, I'm out, I'm done. Now there's Carlos with your wife, I'm assuming, maybe some kids, I don't know. And you're in Nashville and your career is done. And now what do you do? I mean, that's a lot of layers. You got to find work, make money. So what do you do from there? Yeah.
So I am at that point when I left, I kind of got out of my record deal. I was leading worship weekly, once a month at Elevation. So I was there like one of their main worship leaders at Elevation. I'd go down to North Point. I was at Saddleback. I was at a church in Vegas. So it was still paying my bills, worship leading, although I wasn't like a signed worship artist touring anymore. I was still like, my gig was leading worship on Sundays. And I just, more and more friends of mine were like, I'm just telling you, Carlos, you're a better communicator, speaker. So because I had a blog that had some readership, I was approached by Zondervan, which is a Christian publisher. And
I mean, that is the Christian publisher.
They're and they offered me a book deal. They offered me, and I remember at the time going like, man, like I'd love to write a book, but I don't know if I could like be a speaker. I don't know if I could like talk for longer than 2 minutes between a song. And so I kind of just went all in. Like I literally went, I tell this story in maybe Enter Wild, one of my books, but I go to my laptop because I pray about it. I do feel like God's like, yeah, this is the direction you should go. And so I go to my laptop and I remember I canceled all my worship leading dates. It was like 84 of them for the rest of the year with one email. And I said, the Lord has called me to be a speaker. And so like, I'm just letting you know, I'm going to send your deposit back. But if you want a speaker for your event, I would love to come and speak. Fully thinking that they're all going to email me back the next day going, of course, Like, but the emails were, no, we have Bob Goff, we have Craig Groeschel,
Right.
we don't need you. And so it went crickets, and that was pretty scary. Like it was it was a scary, I say season. It was probably like a month where I was begging, man. I was like, where can I speak? What can I do? And then craziest story, but it was 2014, and I had just sent that email out. And I remember I'd quit leading worship. I'd quit doing music, and I'm just going to be a speaker, but nobody's booking me. And I got an email about a month after from the White House. And the email said that, listen, this is so crazy.
I'm sorry, what?
Yes. The email said, the White House would like to invite you to give a devotional and sing one song at President Obama's Easter prayer breakfast. And literally in one day, I go from not having any speaking gigs to my very first speaking gig being literally in the East Room of the White House, sitting at the table having breakfast with President Obama. And let me tell you what happened. He saw a video of mine singing with the homeless man on Facebook. So I had this video where this homeless man walked onto my music video set and started singing with me. So we kind of cut the production and he just kept singing. The video went viral on Facebook. President Obama saw it and asked his faith and family secretary, Joshua Dubois, I want that guy, whoever that is, to come and give the devotional. So that's how President Obama found me. Well,
what?
So
that is like a freaking movie script,
no, dude,
bro.
So here's the kicker. The kicker of all kickers is here I am, the son of a first generation black immigrant from Colón, Panama. And my dad shows up with $20 cash in a shoe shine kit. And he used to always tell me he shined shoes at LAX for 2 years to make enough money for one semester at community college. He always told me, Carlos, one day you're going to have dinner with the president. So make sure that you have your manners. He'd always tell me that when I was growing up. And it was so crazy that I got to, that he knew that I was going to have breakfast literally at the table with President Obama. And I end up getting to have, so Joshua Dubois comes up to me after and he goes, hey, the president wants to have a one-on-one with you and your wife because Heather got to go in the red room. So I walk into the red room. This is the greatest story of my life. Walk in the red room and I'm waiting for President Obama to come in. And of course, after sweating, he comes walking in there. I'm like freaking out. He claps his hands like, Carlos, how are the girls? Right? Like he's so prepped right outside the door. Probably somebody tells him that I have to.
You're right.
Yeah, but he comes in acting like he's, and I feel the second I see him, I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy's my best friend. Right? We're like, kind of bro it out, And so I tell him, I go, my dad, he's a first generation. He was asking me about my family. I was like, my dad, he's so proud. He's an immigrant to this country. I was like, he's so proud of me. He goes, let's call him. And freaking President Obama lets me take my phone out, call my dad in the moment. And he goes, Dr. Whitaker. And literally my dad to this day, he doesn't have a lot of memories. He remembers that one. He got to talk to the president of the United States. And so here's where a lot of my story shifts. Ready? One of the greatest days of my life. Here I am I'm singing. I lead a devotional in the White House. I sing Nothing But the Blood of Jesus, in the White House. President Obama.
You're a former CCM evangelical worship leader.
Yes. Right. And so President Obama is singing with me. Like he's singing right in front of me. So I go on to Instagram. I may have been Instagram and I post pictures. Right. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, look, it's me. And literally the president's like right here. I'll send you a photo of it. Maybe you can stick it in your video. And we're like arm in arm, smiling. I'm singing the song. I'm leading a devotional. And I put that on my Instagram. This is the first time that it clicked for me. I got trashed. I mean, I got destroyed by my followers, like on Facebook, and like, how could you eat with that Muslim, blah, blah, blah. And I was shook because I'd never even dabbled in politics. I'd never even talked about that stuff on any of my socials. And again, this was 2015. I got destroyed. And that was, I think, the first time that I felt this, wait a second, where am I? Like where do I lean? Like, what is happening here? When I was on staff at North Point, I was very open that I was voting for Obama, and I did like a lot. I was getting a lot of crap from people. And I just remember for the first time being like, I don't think I line up with a lot of people that I'm around all the time. And that was kind of the beginning for me. And then after I posted that thing about leading worship, I was freaking leading worship, singing your hymns in the White House, and I got destroyed. And so that was the beginning for me of going like, okay, there's other stuff I got to unpack. So anyway, wow. I know that was a lot. I wasn't even planning on going there, but
no. Well, I mean, I'm glad you did that. First off, that is a crazy ass story. That is like literally someone wrote that for a movie kind of story.
I know.
And also, I am not surprised that when you post it to your followers, who are probably mostly in the evangelical spaces that they exist in, you got trashed for it, right? Because me, as someone who grew up on talk radio during the Obama years, right, I know what they were saying about him. I know. I voted for Romney and for McCain because that's what good Christians do, you know? Right. So I can't say I'm surprised, even though, of course, it's disappointing. Sure. So you have this moment that is like, maybe like the first real whiff of the smelling salt for you. We're like, whoa, something is like wrong. And then 2016 pops up, right? Like this moment happens where now, you know, we're all watching this guy named Trump just kind of take over the Republican Party and then becoming more and more popular in evangelical spaces by several, maybe dozens of prominent evangelical leaders. And what I tell people a lot all the time is I say, it was so weird for me being raised by people who were so staunchly strict about my own sexual ethic, then mad at me that I couldn't vote for the guy on the cover of Playboy magazine, the guy in his third marriage, the guy, you know, bragging about sexually assaulting women. Like it felt like, wait, you guys taught me to have this kind of integrity. I'm doing what you taught me, but yet I'm still the problem, right? It's still my fault. So so for you, when Trump hops on the scene, and I'm, you know, like you said, you know, maybe some old friends of yours or whatever are tweeting about this guy, you know, and you're a Christian, and you're speaking, I'm assuming, more in like the Christian evangelical space still.
100%.
Okay, so what are you thinking at this point,
bro? I'm thinking. First of all, I like the night that the election happened, and the night that he won, because remember Hillary, like she had the party set, like the balloons were about to drop, like
totally.
Like, it was, and then literally it was like, I'll never forget. I had a conversation with one of my kids who woke up the next morning literally scared because of rhetoric that was being spoken by followers of his. And friends of my child who were saying things, and then my child looking at her skin. And I mean, at this point, like it was like, if you were Mexican or if you're black, like, especially at the very beginning, not that it didn't get worse, but there was palpable fear in my kid when this, and the fact that there was palpable fear that happened inside of them without me even leaning into that. This is just stuff that they're hearing through their own friendships. Bro, I was actually on my way down to Atlanta to record a podcast for this podcast called Parent Q that I was a part of back then. And I just told him, I was like, I can't record this podcast. I'm physically not okay. I was physically not okay. And I don't think because I hadn't seen Trump enough yet to even understand everything that I was going to understand over the next 4 years. It was a gut thing. It was this, and so I'm going to call Reggie. He's the guy I had the conversation with, and see if he can't, because we ended up having a conversation on the podcast about how I felt versus how he felt. And he's like, I voted for Trump. And he's like, Carlos, you didn't. How are you feeling? And we went back and forth on it. I'd love to actually go back and hear my words and the language as to what was real, because it was so guttural that, and it was based on, you know, all his Mexican comments and all the things that he had set up to that point, that I started to feel like I didn't have a place. Like I started to feel like, if this is this really what all of my church friends and close friends are like running towards? Like this, like it was very confusing for me. And I spent a good 2 years really lost as to my love for the local church, my love for the church I was a part of. What year was that? 2016?
Yeah.
And confusion as to I put this, I've never felt more confused about my place in Christendom in America. It got really confusing really fast.
Well, this is actually maybe a good point in the conversation to kind of compare and contrast, because I had the same feelings, but from a very different place, right?
Yeah.
So I never experienced racism. Colorblind supports the way that I am wired to see the world and the way that my body is designed to, exist in the world. So, Trump was confusing for me, but I was still able to go on for quite a few more years in those spaces because I wasn't the target of Trump's rhetoric, right? I wasn't the Mexican. I wasn't the enemy. I was still on the inside. But I understand now more than ever, I didn't understand it then, why so many people, especially folks of other skin colors and ethnicities, really saw it as like a shocking,
bro,
I'm not safe here. I'm not safe in this space.
That was literally, it was from one day to another. The level of safety shifted, and I never felt that in my entire life. And again, if this was Mitt Romney that was president, I wouldn't have felt the same way. This was literally a specific thing from a specific individual that changed the landscape of safety for me. And I'd never felt that before, right? Like it was very traumatizing.
Well, how was it on the speaking circuit? Right now, all of a sudden, your career is tied to this like really predominantly white evangelical world of publishing and just the whole ethos, and your income is tied to how well you can do that and speak to those people. But now like, in our heads we are miles apart, even if we claim the same Jesus, which maybe now it's not the same Jesus anymore. I'm not sure. Like what were you thinking, and how did you navigate that?
So from 2016. To 2020, I was still existing primarily in faith spaces, in evangelical spaces. I'd written a book. I ended up writing a book called Kill the Spider that came out in 2017, 2018, which was actually a very, it was a very safe way for me to continue to engage in evangelicalism, because it was all about behavior modifications and the root of our sin issues. And so I was able to I was still being invited because, this is a great concept. Kill the spider, don't clean the cobwebs. And I was able to continue in that, in a way that was okay. Although knowing whenever I'd get invited to whatever church that I knew, this is what I felt. I felt like, and I even played into this a little bit in order to keep my job. I felt like the safe black guy. We can, Carlos can come because he's going to come talk about this. He's high energy. He's funny. Our people love him, and we'll probably feel good about ourselves. So I won't say every church is like that, but I think a lot of churches, many churches were like
diverse.
That.
We're diverse.
Yeah, look,
we have Carlos come and speak.
Look, I mean, I would look at their speakers. I would look at who, and it was me. I was the one. And I kind of, again, being as real as I can get, that was paying all of my bills, was the evangelical church and speaking and selling my books. And so I tried to not ruffle feathers. I tried to keep it as, plain as I could and vanilla, and speak to what I was speaking to. Never talk about Trump, never talk about any of these things. Just kind of be silent, all of these things. And bro, it was fine until 2020.
Really quick before we get to 2020, where were you with the queer inclusion conversation? Did you feel like you had to hide part of that, or were you on a journey yourself to kind of get there? What was that like?
Yeah,
for you?
I was probably, remembering that I was raised Southern Baptist, right? Yeah, even though my dad was a Panamanian immigrant, I was still Baptist faith and message. And so for me, my first true friend that was gay. I'd never had any queer friends. And I had my very first one. When I say friend, I mean let's text every day, was probably 2015. And that was when, for me, I was like, guys really love this person. And I became a defender. I suddenly became I felt like every conversation I was having was defending them. And so I think from 2015, honestly, to 2020, inclusion was probably not something that I would have said I was at. I was more defending their humanity.
Yeah.
And I think that shifted in 2020. It definitely shifted in 2020 to where, oh my gosh, dude, it just became that became probably as much as race. It became the other thing that I was just as fired up about, like, not fired up about, brokenhearted about when it came to the evangelical church. So I think 2015 is when I became a defender. 2020 it wasn't a defender anymore. It was I don't even know what the word,
like an ally or something like that.
Yeah, like an ally, I guess, would be what it is.
All right, so let's get to 2020 then. So what happens in 2020? This is now Trump's. It's our second election, right? I mean, it's Biden versus Trump, yada yada yada. I'm just giving people the political landscape here, right?
Yeah.
Trump is saying that in November it's probably going to be a rigged election. He's saying this months ahead of time, and if Joe Biden does win, it will be rigged, and then Joe Biden wins, and it's rigged, and here comes this mass disinformation about a fake stolen election. So for you now in 2020, what was it for you that made you finally go, I'm out, like, this is it, I'm done?
Yeah, it was Ahmaud Arbery, and it was that was the first time that I just was like, man, I can't just halfway say anything anymore. Like, I can't just appease all of my evangelical spaces that are paying my bills while literally watching them at the same time speak blatantly in front of my face on, well, he shouldn't have, he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was probably up to no good. He was running in jeans. Who runs in jeans? And it was like just the noise. And finally I snapped and I made a video called How My White Friends Can Support the Black Community. And bro, it was the most vanilla video. I'm telling you, I look back at my videos now, what I've done, and it was like, hi everybody. My name's Carlos, and like, I love everybody. I love you all. And I just want to be very, like, to let you know that, like, Black people, like, really need your support, and this is how you can do it. But you're not racist. And like, dude, it was so, like, I was just like, and I hit publish, and I had, I may get the math wrong a little bit, but I had 30,000 Instagram followers, maybe 33,000 Instagram followers when I hit publish. I woke up the next morning to 22,000 Instagram followers. And
You're kidding me.
Nope. I lost a third in one night, 24 hours. And bro, I screen captured him. The DMs that I got. And so let me tell you what happened.
Tell me.
I'm freaking out the next morning. Like, I didn't even think twice about it. I did before I hit, so I hit publish, and then I don't think, and then I wake up in the morning. I've got hundreds, maybe even 1,000 DMs from people that are just ripping me apart, calling me a Marxist, like all the things that I've supported you. I prayed for your daughter when she was in the hospital. I can't believe I wasted my prayers on you. Dude, it was brutal. And so they are all publicly letting me know. They're, all my mentions were people that are like, I'm so disappointed in Carlos. He's calling me a racist. Yada, yada, yada. So I'm freaking out. I see my followers, and dude, at this point, I'm like, I'm a Christian speaker that, like, uses Instagram to book his weekends. So what totally. I did? I ran to my phone. I pulled up the video and I hit delete. And so I go, because I was like, screw this. Like, I can't do this. I'm going to put up an apology. I'm going to tell all these people that left, like, I'm sorry. Cause dude, I've got 3 kids, teenagers, bills. I'm literally just looking at my bank account, freaking out, going like, what did I do? Like, I'm not about to martyr my family for, and so I'm just like, so I hit delete on my phone. Right. So I go to the video and I go delete. And when I hit delete, I'm not kidding you, another pop-up popped up on Instagram, and it said, are you sure? And I swear to you, if that was not Holy Spirit himself, like I was like, oh crap. Like, it took me 10 minutes to hit delete. Like, I just was like, oh, do I hit delete? Do I hit delete? Finally, I got the courage and I was like, delete. And then it was like, are you sure? And bro, Tim, I'm telling you, that was a defining moment for me. The first defining moment was hitting delete. The second defining moment was hitting cancel. Because it said, are you sure? And I just hit cancel and I left it. And I was like, no, I actually feel like this, if I bothered this many people,
Yeah.
Screw it. Let me just bother everybody. So that was the beginning of me teaching my white followers how to be an ally. And you know what? Sure enough, a month later, I think it was Demi Lovato shared one of my posts, and poof, 50,000 followers. Then Kim Kardashian shared one of my posts, poof, 100,000 followers. Then next thing you know, I'm starting to get all of these people, and I'm starting to get a lot of people that felt like me kicked out of the evangelical church.
Yeah.
A lot of people that were done, a lot of people that were, and so then I just found myself in this space. I think I found you in that season. I found myself in this space of like, I don't really know where I'm at. A lot of things are shifting in my heart and in my brain. I mean, honestly, like even a lot of the LGBTQ plus things, like I'm like, well, what do I think about that? Like, yes, I'm an ally, but how much of an ally am I? When am I going to become all the way of an ally? How comfortable are my LGBTQ friends going to be with me going like, I don't know. Is that okay for me to say? Like, am I going, And so, all of this stuff started coming out in me that I felt more empowered in that season than I ever had in my entire life. I felt more made for the conversations than I ever did. And so that's really what happened in 2020. And so it began with that Ahmaud Arbery video and watching my followers disappear, and then starting to watch these new people show up. And then a lot of those followers that left started coming back too, going like, I was wrong. Like, and so that year was a lot of work on race for me. I spent the majority of my time on Instagram teaching on race, teaching on racial reconciliation, began speaking at a lot of companies for DE&I because I got uninvited from the evangelical church, right? So like I'm like no longer able to preach because they're not having me anymore because Carlos is talking about Marxism. Carlos is talking about being a socialist. And so now I'm like, well, what do I do? Well, I got to go into the corporate space because they're the ones that are inviting me to talk about justice, but not the church. And so, I start getting that chip on my shoulder, and now I'm getting angry. But the whole time I'm still plugged into my local church. Like I'm still plugged into my church here in Nashville. Not as much the church as I am my pastors. They're just some close friends, and they walked me through that season, and it was complicated, and it still is, but not as much. So,
well, really quick, it's interesting that the post that got you kind of like pushed out of the typical evangelical speaking circuit wasn't you saying, "Hey, I'm no longer a Christian. Hey, the resurrection never happened. Hey, the Bible's a bunch of bullshit," right? You simply said, essentially, Black Lives Matter, and white people can we try and listen to the voices of Black people, especially as we watched a man on television be lynched right in front of us, right? Right. And that for them was the gate that you just could not walk through. For them, right? Because the response was no. Insert rhetoric here. Yes. And now you're outside. And I think it just reinforces for so many of us that these systems are not so much concerned about right theology as they are around like right political ideology, which unfortunately, I'm just going to say it bluntly, it is drawing on a legacy, right, of American evangelicalism, which is white supremacist in nature. Like it just is. I'm sorry. It just is. I'm not saying every person in there is a white supremacist. I'm just saying the rhetoric that they're drawing from has a goal. It has a goal to center something around itself. And it's not the voices of people who usually are the underneath the boot of that ideology. I'll put it that way. Right.
No, totally. No, that makes sense. And it was the conversation of Ahmaud, but it was the first time that I ever put a hashtag Black Lives Matter ever. It was the first time I ever did it on an Instagram post. Woo, that was it. Game over.
That was it. So you mentioned a second ago that it's still kind of complicated. What does that mean? You're talking about like how you relate to your current church or like your own theology, just where you stand in the faith. Like what is complicated for you still?
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Like it is, a couple things are complicated. I think that let me go here first. Let me just start with like LGBTQ, like how that is still complicated to me. That what's still complicated to me is as I read the scripture and as I balance everything I've learned in my past with everything I feel in my heart. Right. Yep. So like there is like this guttural feeling of total acceptance inside of me, which is like fighting for marriage equality, fighting for all of the things that I feel like all of my LGBTQ plus friends deserve. But there's still a battle in me as I read scripture, and as I go, well, God, like, what do I do? What do I do with honestly who I know as individuals, what I feel in my heart towards them, and what I read in this book that I've vowed to follow my whole life. And so I find myself in this tension. I find myself in where a lot of my LGBTQ plus friends are helping me walk this out. Like, and this is why I'm so appreciative is, I have this silly phrase I say all the time. I don't stand on issues. I walk with people. And a lot of the Insta Familia LGBTQ plus community is walking with me. And they've been my safe place. They've been my place of like, okay, so what do I do with this? And how do I deal with this? And so that's complicated. So like, I've actually never even come to a place, because the word affirming for me is such a, it's been hijacked, and it's such a, when you make a statement, I'm either going to lose half my people, or I'm going to lose the other half of the people when I say that. So I'm walking in a journey towards trying to understand, well, what are you, Carlos? Like, are you affirming or are you not? I'm like, well, I mean, I think I am, but maybe I'm not, because I think this. And so that's one thing that's complicated for me. And I wanted to actually share this with your audience, because I'm like, please come to me and continue to help me, continue to teach me, continue to, as God becomes bigger for me, not smaller for me. Right. That I think that conversation becomes even more important for me to be having. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is just the evangelical context of a church. Like I go to a church where sometimes I'll see people on the stage that I know were at January 6th. Like I know myself that they were, well, I didn't march in the Capitol, but they were singing a song on a stage right in front of it. Right. Jeez. And so what do I do with that? Right. Like, how do I handle what I feel? Well, how I've been pastored to handle it is, because for a long time, for about a year after that, it was just rage that was inside of me every time I would see that. And then, you know what I did? I took my own freaking advice and said, hey, we need to go to dinner, because I got to work this out, because I'm raging and I'm not able to do what church isn't the experience that I want it to be for me. And so it's been a process. It's been a process of hearing and understanding and not agreeing, but still hearing and walking with people, as opposed to standing and fighting. And so, so yes, man, it's complicated. It's still complicated. I'm on tour right now, and on my tour, I'm going to churches that, I don't know who they're venues, but I'm like, would these people ever even invite me like to speak on their stage if it wasn't for me being on tour and using their facility? Like, right. Like, it's just, I'm still in it. And so it's still complicated. And, anyway, well, that's a lot of vomit, but there you go.
It's good vomit, because, the audience out there knows that I go to Turning Point USA events.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
And I talk to those people. I have some of their phone numbers. I got dinner with one of them a couple of weeks ago when I was in one of their towns. Yeah. And the question is why? Right? Yeah. Why? And obviously, Carlos, you're on your own journey. I'm not here to tell you how to live your journey, sure. Right? Yeah. But I think, at least for me speaking, I've realized more and more that as I've done my own listening, right, to first off voices outside of my own perspective, and also, theologians and scholars who are just like freaking brilliant, especially when it comes to the Bible. I am convinced more and more that, at least in the scriptures, we see a narrative that God takes sides. He tends to side with the oppressed and vulnerable consistently. Yeah. I mean, I'm not really a fan that God drowns Pharaoh, frankly. I'm putting that out there. Like, I think it's a little too violent for my taste, right? But like, God essentially drowns the empire in favor of the ones that were under the empire's boot. Okay. Yes. And there's all other kinds of themes there. At the same time, if we believe in non-dehumanization, which is a huge core value for me, I know it is for you, And we have people in our society that are participating in the dehumanization of others,
Yeah.
right? What I always wrestle through is, how do we, especially as an organization, as a nonprofit, the New Evangelicals, how are we emphatically in the corner of the voices who are marginalized,
Yeah.
while also having a posture of invitation for the people who are doing that marginalization to rethink their positions and help find better ways forward? Because one thing I caught on to pretty quickly is that I know personally I was not changed by being called an asshole or a bigot or a jerk off. I was changed by people's stories. Right. Like the first time I ever met my gay friend, I worked with him at Starbucks. Yeah. His life, just talking to him without him even knowing it, changed my entire paradigm, completely shifted me. Right. And I know that calling people names doesn't really, change them. But I also know that sometimes you have to call out the harm that people are doing. Sure. The voices that are underneath that boot see that other people see them, right?
Yes.
And so I kind of wrestle in that tension a lot, where I'm like, I will talk to Charlie Kirk if he ever reached out to me. I would get dinner with him, but I also have an obligation to tell him the harm that he's causing to people that we work with, right? Yes. And I think that's the rub that I always see myself in. Yeah. No, and that is a rub. That is a rub that I continue to find myself in. It's a rub that, is it's uncomfortable for me, I think, because I am still existing in a lot of those spaces. I am still being invited to speak in churches. And so now that I'm, the story that I teach on now in churches is Acts 8. And I mean, I literally told it yesterday. I was speaking Chick-fil-A corporate. And so here I am going, oh, sweet, I speak at Chick-fil-A. I can tell a story of scripture. Well, so here I am telling the story of Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch. And everywhere I talk about, I'm like, he was a black man that was riding in the lap of luxury, and he was castrated. So here is genderless. And bro, in 2023, when I bring up this scripture in churches, people do not know what to do. Every night of my tour, I teach on this scripture, and you can just see the farther south I get, you could just see certain, people's skin color. But I feel like it's so important for me to continue to lean into this and continue to keep my finger on the pain point that people have to feel. And that's what you're talking about. It's like, I can't just go into these churches and faith spaces and keep just talking about how to be a better, how to have a better Christian life. Right. Like, I'm like, it's, there's too many important things for us, like politically, culturally, that we need to be leaning into and having conversations in order to stop dehumanizing people. And so I'm with you. We get to speak on it maybe to different people that are listening. I feel like there is some overlap, but I'm doing the best I can, trying to help people in the way that I do. Well, just to wrap up, I mean, you do have a new book out, which we haven't even gotten to this entire conversation, but you have a book out called How to Human. What's the book about? Give us the quick synopsis. Yes. How to Human. I use the story of the Ethiopian eunuch and how to be human, how to see humans, and how to free humans, and I just talk about Philip, and the Ethiopians in a chariot. And I say, I tell people in the book, to get in the chariot. And that is all it's what you do when you go to all of these weird conventions that you go to and hang out with, these people. You're getting in their chariot is what you're doing, and so it's just a book about, what's the subtitle that my editor wrote that's so fluffy, but I know that you need a fluffy subtitle. 3 ways to share life beyond what distracts, divides, and disconnects us. And I think it's so funny every time I hear that, because I'm like, yeah, that's pretty fluffy, but that's pretty impossible to do, And so it's just a book helping people, I think, just kind of get back to where we were, or maybe not even back to where we were, but back to where we're supposed to be. Love it. Carlos, it was great, chatting and kind of unpacking your story here with me in real time. I really appreciate so much fun. Yeah, it's a good time, man. And next time I'm in Nashville, I'll make sure I hit you up. I was in town for that pastor's summit, but I had no time. You had no time. You had no time for me, dude. I get it. I didn't. But where can folks find you? Are you on podcasts, social media, Twitter? Plug all your channels. Yeah, absolutely. I got a podcast called Human Hope. You can find it at all the podcast places. Loswhit, LOSWHIT on Instagram and Twitter. Instagram is Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde is Twitter. So I have 2 different personalities for both social media platforms. And then that's really it. So find me in those places, and I'll either make you happy or sad, whatever. Just come have fun. Sounds good to me. As always, Carlos, good talking to you. I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Whitaker.